Long time ago, I made this painting and I titled it Pondering. It's one of my favorites so far, so I decided to paint this character again. But this time I'm taking you with me to see the journey behind the making of Pondering Part 2. I know it sounds so silly like a name, but I don't know why I thought of it. So yeah, I know you got no time to waste, so let's get down right away into business. This is the sketch that I ended up going with. I know my sketches look abysmal at the beginning, but at the end, I'm not gonna integrate this sketch to the final piece, so why bother making a good sketch if I'm not gonna use it at all. The first thing that I'm gonna start with, as you see here, is the basic blocking. In this painting, I'm gonna include an environment, kinda like a background. I hate drawing backgrounds. After laying the basic foundation, I go with the lasso tool and start selecting where my shadows will be. I go to the brightness and contrast option and then lower the brightness, so that way I can get my basic shadows. The shadows obviously are too dark and monotones, so what I do is that I select these shadows and add some ambient lighting with the airbrush. I select the areas as well where she'll catch the lights. The light's gonna come from above, so obviously I select those areas that will catch the light and then start painting with the airbrush again. Throughout this whole entire process, I'm gonna use my good old technique of lasso tool plus airbrush combination. I made a whole entire video explaining in details how I use this technique. If you're interested, you can click the card above here. It's gonna pop up if you're interested. I have removed the sketch because it has served its sole purpose. I don't need it anymore. I know here that her body proportions look so silly and atrocious. Her legs look gigantic in comparison of her head, and her head looks like, you know, like a bean. But don't worry, I'll fix that later. With the lasso tool, I go in and try to fix the general shape, like the general silhouette of the character. Now I zoomed in and start my first phase of refining and adding detail. Now I'm finally sketching her face because I thrive in chaos. Why sketch the face at the start when you can do it midway the painting? You know, it's better. Of course, the whole entire character is gonna be rendered in one layer because why use multiple layers when you have the lasso tool to select, right? Right guys, I really wanted her to look kinda mad, so I kinda give her like sort of a weird expression. I don't know if she looks mad here. And I gave her red eyes because I thought it would work really well with her design. I did her bangs and started to add some basic shadows to her face. Started to kinda fix the silhouette of the hair as well. I finally made her head bigger with the lasso tool and I keep improving on her hair. With the liquify, I gave her finally human proportions. No more tiny head. See, art is all about trial and error and fixing all of your mess with liquify. Thank God we have that. I made her smaller just to center her out and make the background more visible, because if I'm gonna go through the pain of rendering a background, it better be visible. I picked the dark blue color of the background and glazed it on top of the character. That way to help the character integrate more and be part of the environment, rather than just standing as the separate elements from the environment. I did some light with the color dodge brush. So now I finally zoomed in on her face and I'm starting to add some detail. Kinda like makeup on her eyes and adding more details to define her features a bit more. I'm also going around the hair and adding in a bit more detail. I'm using the airbrush for all of this because I just love the airbrush. I'm also adding the shadow casted by her head on her chest, and I moved to the sleeve to add more details and more wrinkles on her sleeve, like on her clothes. You see how I'm jumping from one place to another? I don't stay really focused on one place. I keep fixing the hair, fixing the sleeve, fixing the hand, and then moving back to the face, because for me it's better to work this way rather than just hyper fixating on one area of the character or of the whole painting. Now I'm moving in on her body and adding wrinkles around her waist. I zoomed in to see the bigger picture and I selected the arm and the hair and also like the sword that's cut in her hair, and I'm cutting it and adding it on a new layer just to draw what's underneath, to kind of have like an idea of what's going on underneath, like behind her arm. I go in with the lasso tool, add more details on her clothes, add those wrinkles, fold. Then I start painting her hand, like the whole hand. I decided to kind of have the sleeve folded up, so that way the hand we have like the whole like beige color, so that way her white hair can stand out a bit more, and also like the sword because it's also silver, so that way it stands out a bit more. Now I'm moving into the background and starting to add details on the water that's surrounding her and also like the waterfall behind her. Now I'm zooming in again and now I'm adding and kind of like refining what I started on the face. Adding more shadows here, making her eyes a bit more brighter. I gotta remove the pupil. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to try a more new look for the eyes, and I keep kind of like experimenting to see what looks better. I also love adding that kind of like ambient lighting under her eyebrows. Think of it as like the sleeve. The light on the sleeve is like bouncing on her face. I'm also decided to add like a light casting on her lower face. I'm also like adding more details on the hair. Now moving to the hand, fixing it, adding more details on the hair, the sword, making the hair more shiny because the light is coming from the top, right? Adding more details here and there. I know it sounds really boring. I don't know. Whenever I'm filming like these type of videos, I really don't know what to say because I'm like everything is done on the screen. You just have to stare. Oh yeah, I wanted to add some tears, but then I was like, maybe this is a bit too emotional. Now I'm kind of adding like the kind of like a hair tension that the hand is holding on the hair. You can see there's a lot of strands that I'm adding to show the tension of the wrist, not of the hand on the hair. She has a lot of kind of like this jewelry, and she has like the head of like a dragon head made of gold. So I'm rendering that. I'm also keep working on her hair, her clothes. I also use the lasso tool to help me out, you know, define the shapes better, and I keep adding more details on the sleeve, moving from one place to another. You see how like I select everything that I want. This is why I don't need like to work on many layers, because if I want something I can just select it and then add that shadow or add that fold or something like that. Finding her leg, the shape of her leg. I kind of like the folds that I added to kind of show the waist twisting, like the clothes is twisting around there. And of course I added more water to hide her feet because I ain't rendering any feet. So you know, I also like worked on the waterfall, added those kind of like rocky kind of definitions. I added like that foam. I used like a texture brush to add that. If you're interested, I have like my whole brush pack available, link down below. So I added the kind of like white foam that comes from the waterfall fallen. That kind of sounds weird. And I kept adding more definition to make it more visually interesting. And I start zooming in and working on the character, working on the hands. I kind of sped up things a bit, you know, just to make it more, you know, just the pacing to be a little bit more faster. I know my hands on this painting look absolutely terrible. I'm zooming out to see how it looks, flipping the canvas, very important. Of course, modifying, fixing her proportions with the liquify tool. You know, the liquify tool, always here to help. I decided to kind of add like this transparent cape because she had that in the first like painting that I did for her. Of her, thought it looked a bit more visually interesting. I don't know why, I really liked it, so I kept it in there. So I added more shadow just to make, you know, to make the shadows more pronounced because they were a bit fading away. I added more shadow here and there and started to kind of like, and this hand it looks disturbing the way how I painted that hand. And now finally I'm rendering the background. Man, how much I hate doing backgrounds. Oh no, I'm back to the character. Because I was like, I'm gonna render the character first, and then at the end I'm gonna start working on the background. So I started to fix a bit like I also used this kind of brush, like the basic pressure brush on default to draw the jewelry, or like the dragon on her shoulder. I moved the waterfall a bit more higher so that way the foam don't interfere or show up behind her white hair, because her hair is white and then the foam of the waterfall falling is also kind of like white. So I moved the waterfall a little bit more higher so that way it doesn't, so her hair show up a bit more, because the waterfall is a bit like blue, kind of like a dark blue, so it kind of makes the character stand out more because the character is a bit more lighter. And then with texture brushes I went and started drawing those rocks. I really had a hard time to render those rocks like on the foreground because I really hated the texture that I gave them. So I made them a bit darker, started to play with them. I'm rendering with the same kind of texture brush, I'm rendering the water as well. And I keep working, trying new things, maybe like removing some of the highlights on the rocks, maybe adding more brown, kind of like reddish tones to the shadows. I started also like experimenting with the different texture brushes just to see what's visually more interesting. I added more foam kind of like coming out of the waterfall. It kind of sounds so dirty what I said. You know, just a bit of details here and there. Added her belly button. I also added some kind of like orange tones on her dress, kind of like around the arm and on her stomach to kind of show like her clothes are a bit more wet. So with that kind of like pressure brush, default pressure brush on Photoshop, I went in and started to render out, like paint the jewelry. The same kind of like technique that I stole from Love. You know, no shame, I stole that directly from Love because I really love the way how he renders kind of like jewelry, so I just pick it up from him. I also made some details like the hair strands that fallen on her knee. I'm zooming in on the face and adding more details, just making it more lighter, making like the lower face more light, just to add that contrast between the shadow and the light. Adding some of that highlights, like kind of like just show like the fabric is wet around her. Still kind of sounds dirty what I said. Yeah, I didn't like those. And fast forward, we kind of like I fasted forward for a bit just to make the pacing a bit more. I added like those water kind of like falling in the background, and I also added kind of like a beautiful little flower around her because there was like a circular movement on the like kind of like circular waves coming around. So I added a little flower in there just to make it more visually interesting. So now I kind of like reached the final stage of rendering, which is, you know, kind of playing with colors. You know, there's this effect on in Photoshop, which is the color lookup, and I really love this filter because you can go to the 3D, like this option here, and you can start like choosing different options. There's like the 3D stripe look, bleach bypass, candlelight, you know, these dot cube kind of filters, and I love really playing with them. You know, I keep like hovering between one after another and choosing like which one really suits my painting. And what I do is that I choose what I want and I lower the opacity and then keep kind of like playing with it until I get somewhat of a visually interesting color combination, you know. After that I do that and I'm done with the color lookup, I go to the camera raw filter, and what I do is that I merge the whole entire painting in one layer, and I go to the camera raw filter and I start kind of like, you know, modifying the temperature, the tint, like the exposure, the contrast, the highlight, the shadows, the blacks and whites, you know, just like basic color editing just to see which one looks better. And of course I keep looking back and forth to see like if I'm improving or if I'm just making it look worse. You know, sometimes I play with this filter and I end up like making my art look unobservable. And this is the final painting. Man, I've been talking for 20 minutes straight. It's a lot of talking. And I still have to film another video. So hopefully you really enjoyed this quick little video that I did of this. I made this painting and I was like, you know what, let me share the whole entire process behind it just to have something to post this week. So hopefully you love this video, and if you're interested and if you really like what I'm doing and my art and you really love this kind of videos that I'm making, make sure to like and subscribe and to watch this next video that's gonna pop up on your screen. It really helps the channel very much, and see you in the next one. Bye.